Now, last week was right before our gospel reading for this morning. Jesus was talking about that whole parable of the vine, how Jesus is the vine and we are the branches, and how important it is to stay connected to Jesus. This morning, Jesus is going to talk about that all-important fruit of staying connected, that love, and how that needs to be the main thing in our lives. It's also the Sunday we're celebrating the high school graduates, so we'll hear a little bit about that as well. Back in high school, I had a neat opportunity to start working on my private pilot's license. And during ground school, our instructor had one piece of advice for us that applied to every single crisis in the cockpit. Didn't matter if you were talking about weather problems, instrument malfunctions, or stalls, or spins. It all boiled down to one thing. Whatever you do, keep flying the plane. That's really how simple Jesus' message is to us this morning. Keep the main thing the main thing. He's saying that to his disciples, and he's saying that to us. But it's so easy to get off track. I remember in college, one of my friends had a roommate who arrived before he did and took the liberty of arranging the room. See, this guy was very much into video games, okay? Way too much into video games. And he designed the entire room around his computer that was the ideal gaming computer. It was about 4 feet tall, had a giant monitor, had the ideal keyboard from the 80s. That was supposedly what was ideal. And so my friend walks in, and the entire room, all the beds have been arranged around this computer. That was his main thing. In fact, it was the only thing he did as far as we could figure out. He never went to class. We only saw him outside of the room twice. We saw him going to the bathroom once, and we saw him in the dining hall once. It didn't work for some reason. For some reason, the professors just kind of had a different idea of what college was about. A little bit after the first semester, the professor said, "No more." And his college career got started off on a bad foot because he took his eyes off the main thing. He totally ignored the reason why he was at college. There were a lot of distractions for him. And as dangerous as that can be on an individual level, it can be even more dangerous in a group when we, as a group, don't keep the main thing the main thing. For example, a church that I know of in northeast Missouri, it was actually kind of out in the sticks. Yet back in the 80s, this church got so excited about youth ministry, so involved, that they actually had a district-wide, which for their district was national, a district-wide youth convention at their little church out in the middle of nowhere. People coming from miles and miles and miles around to come find out about youth ministry. It all changed when they got a new pastor. They lost sight of the main thing. They began to think of themselves sort of as a club. They began turning their focus inwards. It got so bad that at one point they said you couldn't even come and worship at the church unless you had been baptized physically within those 4 walls. As you can guess, the church fell apart. And by the time the pastor left, there was only a small handful of hurting people left. And every Sunday they were wondering, is this the last Sunday? That church lost sight of the main thing. You know, you may know some high school students, graduates, and for them, they've got a big challenge coming up, going into college. There's going to be a lot of distractions. They're going to be uprooted from that core of brothers and sisters in Christ who've encouraged them in their faith. They're going to have a whole new group of people. And there's going to be all sorts of things vying for their attention. People are going to tell them you need to do 101 things to fill up that resume during college. Or maybe they might join a sorority or fraternity whose schedule makes it very difficult to get to church ever. And it becomes a challenge in college to keep the main thing the main thing. And think about over the past week, your life. Did you have any disagreements? How'd they go? What was the final word? Were there any trump cards or just things that ended it? What was that? Was it a priority, or maybe it was some sort of definition of success? Maybe the moment someone said something about money, the conversation was over. Or maybe it was just you had to have things your own way. That's what we degenerate into, we fall into, when we take our eyes off the main thing, the main thing. Well, Jesus knew the disciples would struggle with this too. He knew that you and I would struggle with keeping the main thing the main thing. And so here it is in our reading for tonight. He's talked about staying connected to Him. And now He says, keep the main thing the main thing. And He does an amazing job. This is the night that Jesus is betrayed in our gospel reading. And He kept the main thing the main thing. He kept His purpose for coming to earth as His only focus. And that drove Him on. It drove Him on to keep on loving the disciples. That love that He showed for you and for me, He kept focused on that all the way to the cross, when He took your sin and my sin upon Himself, when He died your death and my death, and when He rose in victory over all of our sin, all of our death, and gives that victory to you and me and everyone who believes. Jesus kept the main thing the main thing. He kept that love, just like John goes on and talks about in the epistle reading. Beloved, let us love one another. That love of Christ is the main thing. We don't have to keep saying the main thing, the main thing. That love of Christ is the main thing.